Welcome all. Hope you managed to get some lunch and watch the comedian on the live stage. We're pleased to have James Grainger from the digital payments company Checkout.com with us for our next session. He's going to be talking about redefining your checkout experience to unlock growth and boost revenues. James leads the company's commercial partnership team in EMEA, who work with technology implementations and consultancy partners, including those in the Magento community, including people like us at JH. Checkout.com streamlines digital payments and provides data that gives never seen before clarity on payment flows. Household brands that support in the UK include Graze, Virgin Active, through to global digital native like TransferWise and Deliveroo. We're seeing a widespread of its uses across these big brands. So I'd like to now welcome James. Hi there, James.
Hey, Yannick. Yeah, thanks very much for having me, guys. It's been a great day so far. Enjoyed a lot of the content, learned a few things along the way. So, as mentioned, we here ensure that the customer experience doesn't fall down when it comes to making a digital payment online. However, for today, what we're going to talk about is helping you to ensure that your Magento site streamlines the process of getting that customer to the payment stage itself. So just a very quick bit about checkout in a bit more detail. That before we dig into the guidance, let's set the scene on how we support the checkout experience. So we are one of the last yet critical steps in online commerce. Effectively, we completely remove the friction that can be involved in paying for goods or services that you sell as merchants. Our end-to-end tech stack gives a complete and granular picture of the data for every single payment all the way through its journey. And this is because we own the complete stack. So this is from the point at which a card number or a payment method is on a Magento site, is hitting our gateway, going through our risk management platform to check if it's a fraudulent transaction or not, then going on to the payment method or the card scheme rails to check the issuing bank and effectively, does the customer have them funds in the account? That journey finishes with what we call acquiring. This is the process whereby we move funds from the consumer's account to you as a merchant. Now, in order for you as a business to offer digital payments to your customers today, you could be working with what we call the old guard of payments. Now, what this means is you could be connected to multiple gateways. You could be managing multiple relationships. You might be working with stale data that isn't updated in real time from multiple systems to monitor payment performance or drive your back office processes. Look, if this is you as a merchant or you're a partner making recommendations, then maybe you're not getting the complete picture of the data. And you likely can't offer the payment methods that the customer wants, and maybe not able to expand in an agile way. So that's how we support. But more importantly, let's get on to the meat of the session and talk a little bit around what recommendations we make and how our merchants have seen success with us on Magento. Now, a good place to start here is to talk about what can create friction in the checkout process. And this is where an organization that some of you will have heard of before, but if you've not, is where the Baymard Institute comes in. This is an e-commerce consultancy. It's an independent consultancy that's been around for many years. They've done at least 7 years worth of research on shopping cart abandonment. And over the years, the fundamental statistics have remained the same, which shows that potentially not everyone's doing it in the best possible way. What they saw here with their analysis is that, look, while a large proportion of folks, when they do abandon the shopping cart, they were just browsing. When you start to extrapolate that out and really understand the reasons why people abandon, there's some really interesting pieces of information that come back from that. The first thing they saw in the way that they've analyzed that data is a 35% increase in conversions is possible with the right checkout flow. And a key factor in the analysis where they looked at Fortune 500 companies, for example, was that the average number of elements in a checkout flow is 23, which is huge. What they found was that where merchants brought that down to 12 or less, it did have a dramatic increase on conversion rates. Now, I talked there about how they've sort of extrapolated out that data into the actual reasons for abandonment. And you come up with quite a long list here of reasons for this. But what's interesting is if you read through those on the left there and break it down a little further, actually pretty much all of them tie to payment. So whether it's an overcomplicated checkout flow, a lack of clarity on the cost of the transaction that you're buying, the item you're buying as a consumer, I should say, or the payment not going through, maybe not accepting the payment method. Obviously, remembering that in certain parts of the world, if you're selling cross-border or cross-region, cards are not the prevalent payment method, and it might be that the consumer literally cannot pay for it because you haven't got that method. And sometimes it's the risk-averse shopper as well. We're in this stage now where obviously e-commerce has been around for a very long time. And so some merchants out there could be on their second, third iteration of their platform. And those that maybe aren't, perhaps your site looks outdated now. It's not making a clear enough story around how secure the site is. And we have found that merchants bring improvement from doing that as well. So now that we've set the scene around the many reasons that someone could abandon the shopping cart, let's talk a bit about what strategies we recommend that you could implement here to unlock growth and boost revenue. Now, I hinted at this earlier around the importance of data, and we work very closely with merchants to help them understand what the data tells them from a payments point of view, whether it's identifying gaps in payment methods, improving auth rates, or examining decline reasons. We really believe in that ethos passing on to all of the different data sets that a merchant can have, no matter what your size is or where you're based in the world. Now, if you take that ethos further, everyone here will be running some kind of site-side analytics, right? Whether it's Adobe Analytics or Google Analytics, for example. Now, what we've found here from leaning into this data is that it is possible to use it to iron out the common kinks in a website, right? Whether it's an existing site, whether you're maybe one of the stragglers on Magento 1 and you're still sort of looking at that replatforming, there's really valuable data that you're sitting on there that can be helping you if you're not already looking at it. Now, to me personally, there are three aspects of your data that's really important when it comes to payments. And those are to know your customer, know your website flow, and know your business. So from a customer point of view, you might be selling UK domestically to businesses here, but what about, what are the countries people are visiting the site from? What devices are they commonly use? We heard Peter Sheldon talk earlier about January versus May, and this 10% increase in the average use of mobile devices for e-commerce on Adobe's analytics data that they've got from their merchants. And also just thinking about how long does it take for the customer to research a product, when they're considering buying from you as well. And then website flow is really equally the next most critical part. Think about where do people enter your site? Do they know your brand? Are they going direct to the URL? Are they coming to you from an organic or paid or earned channel, for example? And where do they reach the website, right? Are they going to a specific section of that site? Are they going to specific product pages? And as you start to map out those user journeys, thinking about, where would the customer maybe be in the position to make a buying decision? And how quickly can you get them from the moment of, I want to buy this item or this service, and closing the sale? And you have the power to really improve that. And then finally, knowing your business. Obviously, no one knows the business better than you, especially if you founded the business, for example. But think about that from a payments point of view. If you're selling high value items, perhaps items that you might buy every 5, 10 years or maybe longer, there's going to be a different need when it comes to payment to someone who's selling maybe a commodity item or an item that's purchased regularly, through to perhaps where you're selling a set of products and you want to create a long lifetime value for that customer with the experience that they have maybe the first time they buy from you. And then, finally, if you've got items that you're regularly selling, a lot of businesses are already doing this, but if you're not, this process of moving to a subscription model for some of your products is also a smart way to go because it creates a recurring revenue stream for you as a business. and removes the friction from customers coming back to repurchase items that they need on a regular basis. So going from the data, let's now think about what we can do to personalize the customer experience. And so for us, there are 3 areas where we start on, and that's around talking the language of the customer, selling in the currency that they desire, and making them feel safe. So, in the case of our merchant here, feed.co, they will automatically detect whether you're in the UK or France, ensure the content is in local language, ensure the currency when you're trying to transact is in euros or pounds. This is an area where this can be done very smartly. You can automatically detect IP and you can detect browser language. Through to currency, digital payments providers like ourselves, we can offer you 150 different currencies. So if you really are developing your business to sell across countries and across regions, being able to really take away that concern for the consumer around maybe hidden FX fees, this is a great step. And then finally, the protection piece. So, whether that's just the basics of making it clear what payment method you accept, talking about a secure checkout on the actual page, it could go further still, right? We've seen some merchants have success with using third parties like Norton to benchmark your checkout flow, and that gives you the ability to add a logo on there in that checkout flow to just provide further reassurance to the consumer. And thinking about the demographic of your user, would they find that reassuring to them? And the next sort of step of personalizing the consumer experience really is a couple of items here. Now, look, in this example here on the screen, we're looking at a merchant that automatically detects the device and browser. So if I'm on my iPhone looking to purchase, I have the ability to buy with Apple Pay. If I'm on Chrome, I get the option to pay with GPay, with Google Pay. And these payment methods in particular have the ability to quite likely completely remove the need to gather any information from the customer to purchase. This is very powerful, and it's something that can increase conversion rates and frankly just make it a better experience for the customer. Now, responsive web design has been around for many years, right? I'd be surprised if anyone's site doesn't operate in this way, but making sure that goes from start to finish. So not just, where you, select the products you want to buy, but even on the checkout flow, ensuring you stay inside, that the ability to pick your payment method and complete the transaction is all responding to the device and the browser. And further to that, and I know there's a lot of content today on PWA, on Google Progressive Web App. So I don't need to talk into detail on this, but folks I will know that this is a method that enables you to pick up the pace at which a site loads, and you can navigate through that site. And we're already seeing some early adopters come through that with checkout, and they are seeing increases in conversion rates, and really getting good feedback on the experience that they're creating. So those are some steps there that have been very helpful. Now, we talked a bit about payment methods, and what we do believe on is it really is important to empower the customer to pay how they want to. And this is something where you as a merchant should really strive to be agile. So whether that's reactively looking at data to where customers are starting to come from and maybe thinking about the methods that they would need for those countries, or whether it's proactively thinking about your business. If you're a digital native brand where you own the complete stack from the product being produced to shipping it to customer service at the other end, as you grow into new markets, you're going to be thinking about this. And you probably already are thinking about, well, if I want to expand into the Netherlands, I need to support Ideal, otherwise I lose 2/3 of the consumer market in that country, for example. But also thinking about the line of business you're in, if you're selling, in normal times to international students, do they want to use the card schemes or the payment methods from their home country, like Alipay and UnionPay, for example? Now, the next part here, obviously local payment methods here is important, but thinking about the basket value, what is it that you're selling? Is it a high value item? And what's the demographic of the customer that's buying that item? So for example, most businesses will start by saying, okay, I'm in a cards only country, I'll do Visa and MasterCard. But the further step to this to think about is, other schemes like Amex. Now, Amex has been doing a lot of work to manage their costs for merchants, and also a lot of work around their reward schemes, and actually tying that into the merchants that work with them. But think about it as a consumer. If I'm buying an item that's of a higher value, I might really want my points, and so being able to use that card scheme is important to me. And then finally, this part around improving the purchase conversion, and so for the first time, right? Again, this is where we come back to people like Apple Pay and Google Pay, because you can effectively check out without having to put any information into the site. And it's an interesting one. It's a curious one. Like, we still find, even when we look at our own data, that over 80% of merchants aren't using it yet. And that's surprising, right? Because there's no additional cost to using it over a card transaction, and it does increase conversion rates. There's a dramatic impact in that, especially if you take steps like defaulting and upstreaming. So upstreaming being where you make Apple Pay appear on the product page or on the list page to make it extremely easy to check out when you're purchasing that item, but also defaulting to Apple Pay as well when you detect that that's the device and there's a card already attached to the wallet. So in the cases where you do need to collect data, we've seen results on both sides, right? Whether you do a one-page checkout or a multi-step checkout, what is crucial is that it's nicely laid out, it's clear and crisp on the information that you need in that step, and removing any data that you don't necessarily need to complete the transaction, right? So a smart flow is a guest checkout. It's not asking the consumer to sign up or sign in immediately when they're making their first transaction. Obviously, if you have a saved card for them, make it easy for them to use it so they don't have to input it again, but rather drive retention of the customer after they've made the purchase. Whether that's asking them to commit to giving you their email address so that you can give them update on the delivery status, or sign them up to a newsletter or special offers. We found that that's a much better way of reducing friction. And coming up to, when cards are being accepted, how can you remove or reduce friction here? Well, there's a few things that we've done at checkout that our merchants have found very beneficial. So the first thing here is, it's quite a small thing, but take into account, when someone's inputting their card details, auto detect what card it is. That reassures you that you're putting the details in correctly to start with, but automatically flag when an error is being made. So if the card number is incorrect, the CVV is incorrect, flag it, rather than letting the consumer go through and having to come back. So ensuring that your digital payment provider, the integration method they've given you, does allow you to do this. But also, what might seem like a minor thing but can impact conversion rates is, if you're on a mobile device, when you're punching in the card number, showing a keypad, not a keyboard. That makes it easier to input the number, and obviously it makes it easier to sort of visually see if there's a card that's already attached to the browser as well. Now, improving the checkout experience isn't a one and done thing. It is a process of continuous improvement. And so, as we've said, as your business continues to grow, looking proactively and reactively at the payment methods your customers need, but also looking into the data from the payment side, working with your client success manager to understand, when you are having challenges, why is that? If you have declined transactions, what's the reason behind that? Is it an issue with a particular issue in banking? Can your client success manager help you to improve the rates by raising a case and discussing it with the bank? Is it that if you're actually running a subscription business and you're seeing problems when you're taking your next payment, could you use things like the account updater services from Visa and MasterCard to automate the process of getting an updated card before you try again, but also through to kind of looking at the data and understanding what time of month are you taking a transaction, and is there a certain trend you're seeing as to when you should retry or when you should take first payment. And then the final part here, and something we sort of call the kind of the hidden cost of payments almost. There is an optimization gap as a business grows, when it goes from the millions to the tens of millions to the hundreds of millions transacted online. And there's a hidden cost here, right? It's one thing to have an efficient process, to take payment and complete transparency on the cost of every transaction. but then how are you automating your back office processes? You know, are they a little clunky? Are they manual? Are there things that maybe other departments within the company aren't flagging when they should be? And we're seeing, especially now in COVID times, that digital transformation is becoming more critical than ever, and companies have had time to really think and look at how they operate and how they could improve. And so some of the things we've been doing for merchants has been around our APIs. So there is a reconciliation API that gives you the ability to automatically pull data into your accountancy tools, for example. You know, if you're a business that, especially at the moment, is seeing maybe a little more of a higher propensity of disputes, so chargebacks, being able to pull that API into a back office process, maybe with a team that's able to sit there and respond in a much faster action when you are having to challenge those disputes with card schemes. So that's something else there to consider. And, you know, look, how can we help you as a Magento merchant? Well, we've streamlined a lot of this for you into our Magento 2 extension. We offer a feature-rich extension that has the full gamut of our toolbox of features and product methods. So, you know, a broad set of payment methods is available out of the box. You know, there's things here that you can do from a security and a fraud perspective. So 3DS2 support is there natively, while officially the rollout of this from a strong customer authentication perspective is not here until next year. There is still value if you're not, frankly, doing it, to actually enabling it now, because this shifts the risk to the issuer when it comes to certain cases of fraud. But frankly, it also creates reassurance for the customer that you are validating the transaction and checking who they are, and ultimately that reduces fraud for you. We've made an effort here as well to ensure that we have support for a lot of Magento's inbox features, so things like instant purchase, the ability to customize order statuses to fit with how you run your fulfillment processes in your warehouse, but also where you need to take transactions over the phone. You know, for the occasional transactions, they can be done from an admin panel. We do have partners that work with us to do this at scale when you're operating more with a call center based model. And going back to the comment on PWA, you know, we have started to work with PWA implementations that sit on top of this extension, and also, you know, other types of front ends that are being used in a headless implementation as well. And we have in-house developers here to support as and when needed. So in summary, we talked about 5 things today as to how you can redefine your checkout experience to boost revenue and increase growth. And so first of all, it's about leaning into the data. So whether it's your site-side analytics data, whether it's your payments data or other sources, ensuring you know your customer, your website flow, and your business, and that you're adapting to change as and when you either need to proactively or reactively. Being extremely considerate about the customer experience. You know, this was in the keynote today that, you know, digital native brands who really do care deeply about the experience do extremely well, online. That's something that we feel and have seen goes all the way to the payment stage. So this is around being considerate of language, currency, safety, browser and design and device, and how they all play a part in delighting your customers from that process of consideration to payment. You know, thirdly, empowering the customer to pay how they want to, offering the methods they need for the countries where they're based, and potentially using methods that remove the need to put any information in to complete a purchase. And, you know, refining the checkout flow. So when you do need to collect data, minimizing the amount of information, the number of steps that are there, whether it's on one page or more, to really try and reduce drop off, and also, of course, handling how information is input to reduce payment errors. And then finally, you know, this is a continuous loop of improvement. So coming back to your data, especially as you grow, to see how you're performing and looking at how you can reduce hidden costs on your back office processes as well. Thanks very much.
Great. Thank you very much, James. A lot of information there that was shared. I see that the chat has given. I've got a few questions coming through. Let me pull those up and see if we could answer a couple of these. So there's one from David. You mentioned elements to the checkout and getting those down to 12 or less. Are you talking about an element being like a tick box or a text box entry, or is it a click?
It's a good question. I think it's primarily around elements like tick boxes and text box. I think, you know, there is a value in testing here if you've got the bandwidth to do it, in terms of putting users through different checkout flows and seeing what impact that has, whether it is, you know, more than one stage, or whether you know, it is a single page.
Sure. Okay. There's another one where we're talking about what kind of conversion increase can be achieved with Apple and Google payment pop-ups. That's come through from our head of design, Joe.
It's a great question, Joe. So Apple did some research. It's a little old, but what they did see for some US-based merchants, they had two examples of extremely high numbers. So they saw a 250% increase when it was the ability to buy with Apple Pay on a product listing page. So if you imagine you've got a series of different products where I could go and pick one and buy from there.
Yeah.
What they then also saw is if it's a specific product page, and this is something that we support as well, is that's where sometimes it can be up to 300%. Now, obviously, this is a study that was done previously. Numbers can vary from study to study, but there's dramatic increases in this when it's done in the right way.
Sure. Let's go to one that I think a lot of people will be asking. With social distancing set in the UK, do you foresee a further rise to contactless spending limits?
Yeah, no. So it's actually, I think it's really by coincidence more than anything, but because, you know, the industry had grown comfortable with the use of contactless payments and the risk sort of fraud profile of that, in April 1st, there was actually an increase in the limit from 30 to 45 pounds. Yeah. And so we know that some of the acquirers in the UK have seen a dramatic increase in transactions as a result of that. It's worth also calling out that, you know, being able to use Apple Pay and Google Pay, yeah, it's the same technology as chip and pin, and this has a much higher limit. So, you know, as a retailer, making sure that it's made clear that you've got logos in store that show you support these methods through the terminal, they also can help you there to increase things. And, you know, with the unfortunate, you know, times we're in today as a globe, you know, the more you can do to make payments contactless, even with a phone or a watch, is having an impact there as well.
Sure. Let's go through a few more that we had prepared. You mentioned 80% of your merchants don't use Apple Pay. Why do you think that adoption is still so low?
I think there's a couple of bits. You know, talking to our commercial team across a number of countries, what I think is probably the most key factor is that, you know, merchants, sometimes they find that their digital payment provider charges an additional fee to deploy or use Apple Pay and Google Pay. You know, what we've done is remove that. You know, whether the transaction is, you know, e-commerce, Moto, whether it's directly putting the card number in the page or using, you know, one of the wallets, it's the same cost. There's no additional fee.
Sure.
The other thing as well has just been around configuration and deployment. In the earlier days, it maybe wasn't as easy for developers to set it up. That's something that the tech companies have strived to improve as well.
Yeah. Good. Okay. No, that's good to know. I remember I went to a filling station recently, and I never realized the limit had gone up. So I'd only like put in $29.99 worth of fuel because of the contactless. But
yeah.
I'm not sure if it's been widely advertised that it's moved up to 45. That's the thing.
Yeah. No, there was a bit of press in the payments industry, but that's not very helpful for consumers, because I'd be surprised if they were reading those kind of publications.
Sure. Another one we're seeing, you know, a trend a bit on open banking is becoming quite a hot topic. what do you think the future holds for card payments then?
It's a very good question. It's one that we actually are seeing growing demand from merchants. I think it's in its early stages, and I would think about it from the perspective of the consumer's experience and then the merchant experience as well. From a consumer point of view, the checkout flow with open banking is not as quick and seamless as with a card. You know, there are potentially up to 7 steps. You're potentially leaving the site and going elsewhere to authenticate, which means people could just completely drop off in the process. I think the other thing that maybe consumers are not always aware of and should be is that there isn't the protection that a card gives you. You know, if you purchase something online and you're not happy with it, obviously you should always go back to the merchant. But if the merchant can't resolve the situation, or sadly the merchant's no longer with us, you're protected by the card scheme. You're not protected when you're paying through a bank account. Once the money's gone, the money is gone. Now, we know that in parts of Europe, like the SOFORT payment method, that's particularly popular in the German and in the DAC region in particular, they do have a little better support in terms of how refunds are managed. But still, it's not ideal. I guess on the merchant side, the thing just to mention there is, you know, the potential for user drop off could impact your revenue. And also just managing refunds is not necessarily as seamless. Look, it's clearly coming. It's clearly going to see growth. I mean, one of the key bits is Visa, right? Visa have hedged their bets. They acquired the business Plaid, which effectively provides this kind of functionality. And it's one of our partners as well. So it's coming, but I think awareness of the risks need to be clearer to consumers as well.
Sure. No, that's good. That's good. Maybe just one more from Joe. Are there any checkout optimizations that are considered best practices you've seen cause problems in reality? So, you know, where, you know, you talk about a number entering over keyboards, you know, does it have an opposite effect elsewhere or something of that sort?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think for us, there's 2 pieces to that. I mean, one is just testing the criticality and you know, when you look at project plans for agencies doing Magento 2 builds, you'll always put a long period of time in there for user acceptance testing. So whenever you're making changes, it's critical to test the impact, test it on different browsers and devices, test the payment methods. You know, we provide a sandbox, so that can even be done in your staging environment before you move it to production. I think the other pain point that we can sometimes see is that, you know, Magento is extremely powerful as a platform, which means that there is a lot of customization that's possible. So it's always important for developers to allow a bit of time when deploying things like one-page checkout extensions alongside a gateway. Those are the areas where we will have developers work directly with the folks involved to troubleshoot an issue if it arises. I mean, that's one of the beauty of having Magento developers in-house. It means we can be very nimble to these kind of customizations as well.
Good. No, thank you, James. That was really useful. Just a reminder that all the recordings can be seen and possibly shared with your team if you've missed this one. So keep an eye for the recording after the talk. And our next talk will be on the solution track is Adian, who's talking about adopting an agile approach to ensure a better prepared, when you're better prepared for growth. And that starts at 1:50. So we'll have a small break for 5 minutes. Thanks again, James. Appreciate that.
Thanks very much for having us. Yeah, cheers. Enjoyed it.
Bye.
Bye.